It begins with a fairy tale wedding in a grand cathedral, where Lucy and Tom are wedded under the watchful eyes of God and before a crowd of adoring guests. The newlyweds step out of the church and onto the estate grounds, sharing a kiss for the crowd. Wedding photographers come next. Guests make themselves comfortable under umbrella shades with tables. Daisy Parker comments it's a grand wedding. Andy Parker adds it's definitely bigger than theirs was. The fields are littered with tents, each with its own activity and services for the guests. Tom finds Lady Maud and expresses gratitude that he got her blessing to be with Lucy. She'd been telling companions that the young couple would have the estate while she'd relocate to the dower house. She's quite excited about moving. Lucy and Tom cut the cake, then they get into their classic vintage automobile and set to leave. They bid guests goodbye as they drive off towards their honeymoon. Robert informs Mary and Rosamond that Mary's grandmother, Violet, has asked to see Mr. Murray, her lawyer. Mr. Murray wants all three of them to be witnesses at the meeting. Violet is surprised to see the trio, because Murray hadn't mentioned he was inviting them. The lawyer soon joins them, and Violet shines a light on the situation. She owns a villa in the south of France. The property will be inherited by her great-granddaughter, Sibby. Violet has to explain further the missing details. Before motherhood, she met a man, Marquis de Montmirail, who invited her to spend time at his villa. Sometime later, Guy writes to Violet, revealing that he'd transferred the villa in her name. She thought it was a joke at first, but now that he's passed on, it's clear it wasn't. Even his widow was caught off guard by the news. Violet has chosen to let Sibby inherit the villa because her cousins already have hearty inheritances. Even Lucy and Tom's potential child already has an inheritance. Violet is only trying to be fair and make sure the children are settled equally. The Marquise's widow won't go down without a fight. She plans to take the matter to court. Violet considers the property a jackpot, so there's no way she's ever going to turn it down. Just before Mr. Murray leaves, Mary hands him a letter with a task she'd like him to carry out. She will call him in a few days, should he have any questions. The family gathers around, wanting answers Violet doesn't have. She has no idea why the Marquis gave her such a gift and is done discussing the issue. Members of the Crawley family are out on a stroll around the estate grounds when Robert is approached with news that someone from a film company wants to talk to him on the phone. Robert goes off to see what the caller wants while the rest of the strollers lightly discuss the villa and how accessible it is in the summer. Robert comes back with the news that Mr. Barber from the film company wants to shoot a film there at Downton. Robert turns him down, but Mary believes they can at least hear his offer. Lady Edith also doesn't hate the idea and accompanies Mary to hear the company out. Rosamond reasons the company will pay them and the money will go a long way. Rosamond had asked about Henry, Mary's husband. He's been here and there, Istanbul last she checked. She confides in Edith that Henry is putting his hobbies and adventures first. She can't shake off that his top priority isn't really her. Mr. Barber arrives at Downton, and with a swift scan of the eye, he can say the prospects are promising. Indoors, he tells them how the film industry is evolving. Filmmaking has been confined to studios, but now it's stretching toward actual landscape and houses. The film they plan to shoot is called The Gambler. Downton will be used for gambling club shots. Edith and Mary know Violet and their father won't like the reputation of a gambling club tied to Downton, so the women ask for time to really think about the proposal. The filmmaking process will last for only a month. The payment plan is written on the back of the card Mr. Barber hands over to Mary. Mary shows Edith the card and both raise eyebrows in a way that suggests mouth-watering. Over dinner, Robert is still pessimistic. Violet asks Mary to show her father the attic. When they get there, his mind changes. The roof is leaking and the house is in need of maintenance. A renovation would bring them to social par as they entered 1930, a new era. Robert can't hide that he's proud of Mary and gives her his blessing to keep taking the lead. Mrs. Elsie Hughes informs the staff downstairs about the film. Some are for it and others are not a fan of the idea. Elsie tells her husband, Charles Carson, Downton's longtime loyal butler. He nearly has a heart attack arguing the estate has opened its doors to the public once, and it was a disaster. To think they've failed to learn from those mistakes. He also believes the house is too prestige to be reduced to a venue for vulgar actors to prance around. Mr. Mason is also against the film and advises both Andy and Daisy to keep their distance from the promising chaos. In Mr. Mason's absence, Andy expresses to his wife that he's not so settled about their stay on the farm with Mr. Mason. Meanwhile, the issue of the villa hasn't gone away. Robert informs his wife Cora that while Montmirail's widow is aggressive, his son is open to a more amicable settling. The new Marquis has asked to see Violet's representatives as she can't travel the long distance. Robert proposes they travel with both Lucy and Tom, since Tom's daughter from his late wife, Sybil, is the beneficiary of the villa. It would also be a way to get to know Tom's new wife. Both Anna and Daisy have found posters of the lead protagonists for the film, Guy Dexter and Myrna Dalgleish. Cora mentions they've contacted Tom and he's game, but they'll have to come with Maud Bagshaw, who's still having the dower set up. Edith wants to tag along as she started writing again, and the trip would be a good way to get the creative juice out. Her husband, Bertie, mentions Edith has resumed work for the magazine she owns. She's still a young mother, but that's why they have a nanny. Mary seeks Violet's advice, wanting to know whose side she's on concerning the filmmaking. Violet just wants to keep Downton afloat. Mary concedes it won't be an easy month, but the money they pay will at least fix the roof. Violet hopes Mary can be stern with the filmmakers, so she doesn't end up being a fool at the end of the experience. Elsie, the head housekeeper, dishes out instructions. Mr. Bates and Miss Baxter will accompany the Granthams to France. The rest of the staff will help out with tasks surrounding the movie. Elsie also reveals that the lead protagonists will be lodged in the main house for the duration of the film, while the other crew members will be set up in the village. Elsie knows her husband will get in the way and approaches Mary with this dilemma. Mary asserts they'll need to send him off to France. Elsie goes on to convince Mr. Carson that his discipline and loyalty will be needed with the Granthams in France. On the other hand, Mary talks her father into letting Mr. Carson come, so the former butler can feel of use. The film crew arrives and gets straight to work, offloading wardrobes and equipment. Daisy and Anna watch in awe as Myrna steps out of her car and struts towards the house like she owns the place. Mr. Molesley also shows and tells Miss Baxter he is there because he's eager to witness the production and hopefully be a part of it. It's a full house, and Robert finds his family hidden in one of the studies. Sibby has come to visit. She'll be with the rest of her cousins, while the adults attend to family matters. Mary introduces Myrna to the family, and she proves to have no courtesy and an air of arrogance. Robert lets on that Montmorally's son insists they stay with him at the villa and not some hotel. Guy Dexter is more sociable and likable than his co-star. Myrna continues to turn heads, but not in an admirable way. She has a strong Cockney accent. Daisy is still on cloud nine, and Myrna is with them. If only she knew better. Elsie will need both Anna and Daisy to unpack the star's luggage because she's brought a truckload. Anna is the official lady-in-waiting for Myrna, but Daisy is eccentric, getting close and personal. Cora needs help adjusting her will and approaches both Isabel and Baron with it. The trio goes on to discuss Violet's limited time with them and how Mary is much like her grandmother. The family gets to know the lead stars and the director better over dinner. It's clear to Barbara that the family is only involved for the money, and Myrna gives them more reasons to keep it that way, with her arrogance and rudeness to the servants. Robert addresses Barbara about this, but Myrna isn't an easy person to scold. Thomas Barrow, Mr. Carson's successor as head butler, introduces himself to Guy, and Guy hints at his attraction. Everyone involved in the French mission said their goodbyes to their loved ones. Cora calls out to them to hurry up because they have a train to catch. Daisy serves Myrna tea while she's getting dressed for the set. The poor maid gushes her adoration for the actress, but Myrna abruptly cuts her short and walks away. Barbara starts to shoot the scene. It's still an era where films are basically moving pictures with mimes, although Barbara had mentioned they've started throwing in some lines here and there. Molesley, a film enthusiast and a former footman in the Crawley home, carelessly interrupts the shot. Violet pardons him, but Barbara is irritated. On the cruise ship, Maud scolds Tom for his conspiracy aura, especially with Violet's gesture to equalize Sibby with her cousins. Meanwhile, Mr. Carson is experiencing seasickness, and back at home, the workers catch themselves up to speed with what's happened. Myrna is rude, Guy is mannered, and Molesley is a guest star in the film. The family arrives at the villa, and the Marquis, Edouard, welcomes them warmly. He introduces them to his mother, who has veiled hostility towards the Bransons especially. Meanwhile, Mr. Mason is being nice, giving Daisy and Andy their privacy. He tells Mrs. Patmore that he'd like them to feel at home and take on the tenancy when he surrenders it. Mary is in a damper mood because Henry won't be coming home. Barbara invites her to see one of the company's films, convincing her she doesn't have to answer to anyone. She is interested in seeing the magic behind movies and decides she'll take him on the offer. Mary informs Violet about her movements, and also about Henry's extended absence. Violet is fine with Mary going to Thirsk. She, on the other hand, wants as much distance as possible from the film production. La Marquise isn't getting warmer to her guests. Robert clarifies they didn't come by force, but by invitation. He's, however, curious to know why the late Marquis did give the villa away. Edouard points out that they can buy another villa. He also pointed out that the villa was home for many winters. Edith makes known to Edward that she's a journalist who owns a magazine and she would like to publish some pictures of the villa in the magazine. Edward grants her permission on the account that he approves the photos first. Elsie updates Barrow, saying that only Guy and Myrna would be available for dinner. He seems down, and Elsie persuades him to talk. There was a valet named Ellis that Barrow was attracted to. Ellis is getting married and Barrow is disappointed. Elsie reminds Barrow that his sexuality will face scrutiny and isolation. Romance for him in the era they're in will come only by sheer luck. The movie theater is almost empty, despite Barbara's claim that Myrna's movies sell out. Robert asks Edward why he didn't just meet with Violet in England. He explains Robert is of more importance to him. As much as the English family has settled in the Riviera, they're still on edge about their host's true intentions. Tom believes Edward loved his father enough to respect his will. Mr. Carson goes shopping for a hat, although Maud saves him from a fashion disaster. The workers gather around to hear Guy's rise to fame. He started as a trader. Guy engages Barrow in conversation, wanting to know more about the butler. Barber is shooting when he gets a telephone call from his superior. Isabel and Violet discuss the tea. There might be trouble in paradise, as the marketed audience has evolved. People want to talk about films now. Violet doesn't get the hype around moving pictures at all, both talking and silent. Barber comes back with bad news. The production will be suspended till further notice. Barber tells Mary the truth, though. Talking films are making waves, and the production company isn't interested in investing in an outdated silent movie. A lot of the crew members are still owed money, and now they'll be fired on top. Mary saves the day when she suggests The Gambler can be converted from a silent movie to a talking movie. Daisy complains to Mrs. Patmore that Mr. Mason isn't easy to deal with. Mrs. Patmore only has nice things to say in return about Mr. Mason. She admits she was attracted to him once upon a time. Myrn isn't taking the new development well, even when Anna tries to help her see reasons that it isn't over yet. Guy expresses his grievance to Barrow. The butler remarks Guy can still make it as an actor. Guy has a good voice, according to Barrow, and this means his career could evolve rather than end. Montmorally's lawyer reveals during a meeting between the two families that Montmorally had written 4 wills, each naming Violet as the beneficiary of the villa. His widow wants to contest this in court, suspecting that Violet might have blackmailed her husband. The lawyer advises against pursuing legal action, arguing that the villa's loss won't significantly impact their wealth. Besides, the villa originally belonged to Violet before Montmorally ever became involved with his wife. Edward takes Robert aside and satisfies his curiosity. He'd asked Robert to come because they might have a stronger connection than just the villa. Violet and the late Marquis lounged in the villa for a week together in October 1864. It dawns on Robert that he was born 9 months later. Tom has his doubts about Sybil owning the villa because it's not an estate, but a leisure home. Lucy's take is that Sybil wouldn't have taken mind, and she's sure Sybil will grow to appreciate the place. Tom affirms he loves Lucy, even more than he thought he was capable of. The other 3 women, Edith, Cora, and Maud, watch the lovebirds and are in support of their thriving love. Maud hopes the villa can become a spot for their future family getaways. Before Maud leaves to take a nap, she notices Cora looks tired. Edith confirms it, but Cora waves off the worry. Miss Baxter divulges over light conversation with Mr. Carson and Mr. Bates that she's fixed on Mr. Molesley. She affirms he's the man of her dreams. Robert relays to Cora what Edward told him. He's wrapped in the possible scandal coming to light and doesn't realize his wife might be having more than a heartburn. Molesley is about to be of use to the film production. He's a schoolmaster at the village and can lip read, so Anna suggests he can help the actors keep track of their lines. Edith is getting ready to take some pictures when Mr. Carson stumbles upon a miniature of Violet in a showcase. There's a message written at the back. Molesley is in charge of the recording setup. He guides Guy on what to do, and Guy delivers perfectly. When it's Myrna's turn to dub, her Cockney accent interferes, unfit for the upper-class role she's played in the movie. Elsie suggests Mary could dub for Myrna. She's scared as she's never tried it before, but Barbara begs that they've got to give it a shot. Mary delivers it well for her first time. But Myrna isn't happy about it, throwing a tantrum as usual. Robert's conspicuous birth story has spread to the other family members with him in France. It's clear that Montmorally was in love with Violet. He got married 5 years after their encounter. Daisy has an idea to get Mr. Mason out of their hair. She tells Andy she'll bring up Patmore's attraction to the table in hopes that he'll pick on it. She goes ahead to lay it down as soon as Mr. Mason comes into their space. According to chivalry, he can't live off a woman no matter how much he's also attracted to her. Mr. Molesley's passion for filmmaking continues to shine through. Barbara mentions to Mary that they needed materials to add to the script, and Molesley steps in with his suggestions. He's written a play for the movie and has some intake on which direction the film should go if it's not constrained to its synopsis. Barber hears him out and his pitch is moving. Barber gives him the go-ahead to finish up the script for the movie. Over lunch, Edith brings up the picture of Violet they found, pointing out there's an engraving at the back. La Marquise is aware, but her late husband mandated she couldn't get rid of it. Regardless of his absence, Mary misses her husband. She tells this to Anna, who in return confides that meeting Myrna has been quite disappointing. It started out as a quest, but turned into a vacation with a lot of entertainment, including a jazz performance. Tom expresses the environment is magical, and he's starting to see his daughter has struck gold. Barber gets to know Mary better. She's been married twice. Her first husband met a tragic end in a car accident 7 years prior. Her son with him was only a newborn when the tragedy happened. She misses him, of course, and has an array of good qualities to remember him by. Mary believes Barber reminds her of him for no reason in particular. Henry is the opposite of Matthew when it comes to personality. He's pragmatic and always hard at work. Barber keeps probing, wanting to know if there's still love, regardless of the hiccups. Mary feels she's shared quite enough. Edward addresses the guests that have shown up for the party. He makes it known that the villa has successors and they should be treated kindly. He also mentions that he considers Robert a good friend of his. Robert holds his breath from his stance in the crowd because he thought Edward was going to call him his brother for a second there. His wife wants him to stop fretting, assuring Robert that he has a bond with his father. Robert is still threatened, worrying that he might be a fraud. Fortunately, he's the only one who seems to care because Edith waves off his worry. Edith finds her husband who has nothing but sweet words for her. He's in awe with her working again, and even she admits it's a part of herself she's missed a lot. Edward informs Edith that she's free to go home with the miniature, as it does belong to her grandmother. La Marquise isn't happy with her son's generosity and pragmatism, but he insists the matter must be handled sensibly and without drama. Edith notices her mom seated and sulking, so she advises that Cora tell Robert whatever she needs to get off her chest. Cora stands to her feet and finds Robert in the company of the Monterelis. Cora lets on they've been a great host, but her family should be heading back now. Edward mentions he and his mother will be leaving soon as well since the villa no longer belongs to them. His mother is still struggling to come to terms with this and gets irritated with Edward thinking Robert is his brother. Edward expresses the lawyers will handle the rest involved in a seamless transfer. Cora wants to go for a walk with Robert. Although it's not revealed what exactly she's suffering from, it does terrify Robert that she's kept it to herself for so long. He panics over losing his identity and now potentially losing her. He wants her to start treatment immediately and is livid that she hasn't mentioned it sooner. Cora makes an excuse, saying she didn't want the ordeal to interfere with their trip. When he breaks down crying, she holds him and reminds him how far they've come. She was in love with him for a while before he returned those feelings. He needed money, and she had it. He mentions he's ashamed to have not been in love from the start. It doesn't matter to her now. Love came eventually, and it's still going strong. They prove this with an eager kiss. Back at Downton, Mr. Stubbins directs sound production. He calls out orders in preparation for the camera to roll and to capture new scenes for the film. While Guy can talk through his parts, Myrna has to keep miming while Mary dubs her voice. This doesn't work well as Myrna keeps forgetting to keep her voice to herself. She storms off after blaming everyone for this misfortune. Elsie reasons Anna and Daisy can get Myrna to come around because the ladies-in-waiting clearly understand Myrna more than anyone else. Myrna agrees to let the maids in while everyone else can piss off. She complains to Anna and Daisy that her career is over, and she's a laughingstock. She tried taking lessons to polish her accent, but it didn't work. Anna gets brutal and reminds Myrna she came from humble beginnings. Maybe the accent is to permanently remind her so. To that effect, she believes Myrna should treat the servants better as she's more like them than the naturally born elite. She also states that Myrna is beautiful and rich, so there are a number of things she can do outside acting. The pep talk actually gets to Myrna, and she admits she had a sister like Daisy growing up. The Spanish flu took her away. Myrna is finally behaving, but the scene is interrupted by Lord and Lady Grantham's unexpected arrival. Downstairs, Mr. Carson speaks highly of how his presence influenced the French servants to be better servants. Barbara affirms Mary has been an excellent addition to the crew. Robert remembers she did have a flair for films and acting when she was younger. Robert puts Tom in charge of showing Violet the miniature as it's his daughter's villa they took it from. Robert lets Edith know that he'll take Cora to the hospital to get checked, something he dreads. Cora approaches Myrna with an idea of how she can still stay relevant. Tom and Lucy show Violet the miniature. She remarks they must think something improper went on between the Marquis and her. She doesn't elaborate further on this, but does appreciate Tom as an addition to the family. He wasn't always accepted, but Violet is glad they can all see things differently now. Tom mentions they'd like the villa to become a vacation home for everyone in the family. They could go there in the summer. Violet can't say she'll ever return there though, winter or summer. As for the miniature, Violet and the Marquis were on a walk in town. They spotted a photographer, and Violet recalls it's the first photographer she'd ever seen. She infers the miniature must have come from a photo from the photographer. Montmirali first sent it to her many years ago, but she sent it back. Isabel sorts out letters from Montmirali and indulges her husband that she'll confront Violet about missing details to the scandalous love story. Guy finds Barrow downstairs and surprises him with a proposal to follow him back to America and see his place, Hancock Park. Barrow thinks Guy needs his valet services over there, but Guy clarifies he's looking for an equal and a companion. Barrow is given time to think about the offer. Robert and Cora see the doctor. The test results will come in soon, but Robert needs answers immediately. Cora isn't as scared as he is concerning the outcome. Whatever it is, she knows she's lived a fulfilled life. Daisy coyly gets Mrs. Patmore to confront Mr. Mason about his chivalry. She's got to be the best character yet. The family is gathered, and Isabel wants to read the content of Montmirali's letters with Bertie. Violet had kept them hidden, but whatever the content of the letters reveal, they'll need to break it to Lord Grantham. Barbara calls Mary aside. There's still a scene to shoot, but the extras have quit because they're still owed. Barbara asks if the servants can help, and Mary rings them so Barbara can ask them himself. He professes he's taken a forbidden passion to the married woman, but while she agrees the feelings are mutual to some level, she won't act on it. She won't kiss him. Robert is told the letters don't say anything about an affair, but Isabel plans to ask Violet herself, so the mystery is cleared once and for all. The servants are happy to help. Everyone except Miss Denker, Violet's personal maid. Violet asks Isabel to get out the miniature from the dresser and read the letter attached. The message is clear. Montmirali wanted something to happen, but it never did. Isabel doesn't understand why Violet has been elusive though with the truth when there's nothing to hide. She explains she avoided temptation by sheer luck, and not because she was in love with Robert's father. She was happy in her marriage, but there were times she needed the extra attention only love could offer. She almost had an affair in Russia, years later. Looking back now, she doesn't want to be remembered as a scarlet woman. She trusts Isabel to set the record straight and keep her reputation clean. The two of them go a long way back. Isabel is George's grandmother and mother to Mary's first husband. Robert can't wait any longer on the sidelines and barges in. He's told nothing happened, but his mother is offended that they believe something did. Robert is only trying to be rational because, in the first place, why did Montmirali give her a whole villa? The guy was a fool in love, period. Barbara offers Molesley a job as a playwright. 4 scripts a year with an attractive pay. The servants are dressed like the upper class. It's surreal getting to sit at the same table they've served their masters and mistresses. During the setup, Barrow agrees to leave with Guy. Mrs. Patmore also has a proposal for Mr. Mason. Molesley proposes to Phyllis Baxter. Little do they know, there's an open microphone hovering and the rest of the house can hear their conversation. Mr. Mason decides to move in with Mrs. Patmore, very much to her satisfaction. Camera rolls in action. The last scene is shot only once because it's perfect on the first try. Barrow hands in his notice to Mary, letting her know his intentions to be with Guy. Mary gets the message and lets Barrow go. Guy is waiting outside to hear the good news. Over an open buffet, Barbara tries to convince Mary to work on another project with him. She's, however, ready to close that chapter of her life. Turns out Cora has been teaching Myrna an American accent so she can pass as one and retain her career. They've also noticed the diva is now more level-headed and polite. Barbara knows it's because she's no longer afraid. Barbara makes yet another move on Mary, but she turns him down. Robert is truly relieved to be related to a father he knew and loved, while Lucy reveals to Tom that they're expecting. They'll keep it a secret, as it's still early days. Edith noticed the attraction between the director and her sister, but Mary can boast that nothing went down. Dr. Clarkson informs the Grantham couple that Cora has pernicious anemia, not cancer as they had feared. The illness is treatable. Miss Denker calls on them from the balcony, informing them that there's an emergency. Myrna is downstairs with the servants, showcasing her new accent and hopes that her career is still on a pedestal. She's in a good mood, even giving Albert, one of the footmen who has a crush on her, a kiss. The family gathers and witnesses Violet take her last breath. Her loyal lady-in-waiting, Miss Denker, is also present and in tears. Before she goes, she makes amends where necessary, and praises are also necessary. In the few days after Violet's passing, life is solemn for all the characters. Violet asks Mr. Carson to resume his duties as head butler. She wants him to take Andy under his wings so he can succeed him, because Barrow is leaving. Violet now wears her grandmother's brooch. She's a bit frightened by the new responsibilities that come with her inherited role, but Mr. Carson assures she's capable enough. Everyone is dressed in black and observes the funeral rites. The family walks in line with the casket that's carried to its final destination in a casing placed on a car. Sometime later, new life has come visiting Downton. Everyone gathers round to coo at Lucy's baby, and in the midst of this celebration, Violet's picture has been framed as a sturdy memorial.